all well. We had a very good evening last night, and I'm really enjoying my first visit to Lagos. Although my children really feel, especially my daughter, she really feels that I should be meeting P squared. That's the only thing. She says, "So mommy, when you meet P squared," I said, "Maken, I don't have that much power." But I'm really excited to be here. Your country and your people have inspired so many other people around the world throughout the last century. And so I'm delighted to make my inaugural visit here, and especially to deal and talk about and enjoying this conversation around women. I'm a teacher. That's my calling, and that's even my personality, I think. And so as a teacher, I bring along with me some teaching aids. So I will be referring to them later on. Feel free when we have a break to stop over and come over and have a look at some of the articles that I will be referring to. The presentation is called The Role of Women. It should be either, you got it? Okay, great. When I was first asked to come and join this conversation, I thought, oh well, that's fun. I'm a teacher. This is not going to be too big of a deal. And then when I saw the list of other people who will be on the panel, I was very intimidated. I thought, oh my goodness, what am I doing there? And so I'm looking forward very much to listen to what the other panelists have to say. To begin with, the whole idea behind public education, or behind education as a whole, came from the European liberation movement, when the Americans, the Pilgrims, moved from the UK, from Europe, and went to the USA. And when they moved, they decided that they were not going to have the same issues and the same problems they had that they were running away from. They were not going to engender the same system of serfdoms and feuddoms. And to do that, they decided to come up with the notion of democracy, having studied the past ancients, Plato, Socrates, and so on. They decided to come up with the idea of democracy. President Jefferson was the very first person to advocate for a nationwide movement for education. Prior to that, the only people who were exposed to education as we know it now were people who are wealthy and rich. They had what they called empresses, and au pairs, and people to teach the children of the wealthy in secluded in their homes and in little communities. And for the men, they were taught, and eventually little colleges began to open, the Harvards, the Stanfords, and so on, that brought together the men, the sons of wealthy men and influential men, including pastors, into communities so that they could spur one another on, and that they could build each other up, and that they could make the networks that would then become their net worth. Let me say that again. That they would make their networks that would then become their net worth. And I will come back to that notion again in a little while as I conclude my comments. But so Jefferson was the very first person to break away from that system of education only for the elite. He realized that if they continued to have education only for the elite, they were just going to replicate what they had left behind in Europe. And so Jefferson birthed what we call now the public education system. And if you remember back to the TV shows we've seen in the past, Little House on the Prairie, all the little communities ended up having one hall that became the school hall or the school room. And so after Jefferson, people have advocated for education as a means to transform and as a means to create agency of people and communities. The first quote I want to have is from one of the greatest educators of the 20th century, John Dewey. And this is what he said: "A government resting upon popular suffrage cannot successful unless those who elect and obey their governors are educated. You must know what you are electing, you must know why you are electing, and then you must be willing to both be critical and also be obedient to those that you elect. Excellent. I love technology. Since a democratic society repudiates the principle of external authority, it must find substitution in voluntary disposition and interest. We must generate and grow an interest. As women, we must read the newspaper. We must listen to the news. We must have a genuine curiosity about the matters that are being decided on our behalf. The matters that affect the way we are, the way we will be, and the way we raise our community, our children, the way we enact our lives. We must begin to create and generate a real curiosity and interest in it. And we must be dispositioned. We must position ourselves in places where our voices are going to be heard and where our voices challenge the systems and challenge the thinking. And the only way that this can happen is through education. So, to answer the first basic question, is education important or critical for women's engagement? Absolutely, unequivocally, yes, it is. I don't know if it'll reach there. Did I move forward or backward? Oh, there we go. So what is the history of women's participation in democracy? I will only go as far as the 1900s, and I'll start even after the suffrage movement. But basically, in 1948, there was the first time that women's issues were considered not exclusively as women's issues, but as human rights issues. That we have a right as women, and in this case as African women, to advocate for ourselves and to have agency. Then the birth of the feminist movement that started actually in the late 1890s with the first design of bloomers. If you ever have heard, those of you who went to Catholic school, we used to wear bloomers under our tennis skirts, those funny shorts with elastic. The first person who wore bloomers to ride a bicycle made everyone, the community was aghast. How can a woman ride a bicycle and B, not in a skirt? And those big caged things they used to wear. So really it started by challenging the status quo in the late 1800s, but significantly acknowledged in the 1900s with the waves of feminism. And there are several waves of feminism. And then the civil rights movement was another place where women became very instrumental, not only in advocating for women and human rights and civil rights, but also in being present on the front lines. If you remember Rosa Parks and the other women that stood around and about the key figures in the civil rights movement. Then recently, 10 years ago, there was a Maputo Protocol. You know, as women, you need to know what the Maputo Protocol was about. It was about African women issues. So if you've never looked it up, please make sure that part of your homework, remember I said I'm a teacher, that part of your assignment coming out of this conversation is that you begin to look up these documents and their relevance to your life and their relevance to how we enact who we are. 20 years ago, of course, the Beijing Platform for Women's Action. And then another 20 years, actually before Beijing, so Beijing must have been 19, because the women's pre-conference before Beijing, I think they were the same year. I can be corrected, but I'm suspecting Beijing was 19 years, almost 20. But the 7th Pan-African Congress, before that, there was a women's meeting. So we've been having these conversations, but we are still here. And what needs to happen is we need to move from this. We need to move from wailing. We need to move from being marginalized. We need to move from having vigils like we're doing right now and protest marches. And we need to move towards representation. We need to move towards more grassroots activism, campaign strategies, campaign support. We need to move towards candidacy. We have Honorable Martha Karua here. We need to move towards being present at the table. And we need to move towards being leaders at the table and in community. But one of the things our convener mentioned today, and so did the doctor, is that there are certain obstacles to eligibility, whether they're in our own minds or whether they're in the society. And those are some of the things I really truly believe education can help us address. We must educate for leadership, social leadership, political leadership, and economic leadership. We must be willing to step up for those. Not all of us are cut out for parliament. Some of us are cut out for the classroom. And by golly, I have made a resolution that I will be the best teacher I can never be whenever I'm put in front of a class. That's my form of leadership. Because if I can influence the young men and women in my class to think differently, to join the paradigm shift, then I've done my job. But even as I do so, then I challenge them to go out and vote for merit. I also don't want to say we'll vote for women just for the heck of it. Because we also know there are some very terrible women. You know, the devil does wear Prada sometimes, you know. And that means we have a lot of things we need to learn about how to represent those who want to be elected, about how we want to educate people to vote, about making sure that that 2 kilograms of sugar that was distributed to every woman in the village does not really impact the vote. Take the sugar, baby, but vote wisely. Okay? Hey, let's be real. We need to also educate for critical thinking and decision making. You know, you see women who are doing inventory. It's consistent. We don't have to shut down to do inventory. I look and I can see, oops, sugar, sugar. Oh, and then I need to buy more towels. So the day I find new towels on sale, in the house. We are managers already. But what the research is showing is that in political systems, the way decisions are made are different. And we need to teach ourselves. We need to educate for decision making and critical thinking. So we need to have education, and the idea of critical thinking is very important here. So education, and this is my parting shot, education raises the water in the lake, and if the water in the lake goes up, then all the boats ought to go up. Instead of thinking about raising one boat at a time, let's raise the water in the lake. And that's where the paradigm shift needs to be. And that's where agency begins to come up. That's where real sustainability is. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and I'm sure we'll have opportunities for questions. But I'm just excited. I'm excited to be able to talk about why education matters and why getting those girls back in school and safely home matters, because they're the next generation of mothers, of leaders, of store owners, and of politicians. Thank you very much.